brought policymakers, academics from around the world here to Beijing. This year's International Forum for the Challenges of Peace Operations, which kicked off Tuesday, is set to focus on emerging threats to peace in the world. Tom Mo has more.
Over 100 policymakers and academics from 30 countries have come together in Beijing to discuss and find solutions to some of the world's biggest challenges to peace. One of the top priorities remains to ensure that peacekeeping missions across the globe be given every chance to succeed.
We need to be sure that when the Security Council has sent peacekeepers into the field, that they have the capabilities they need, that they can be mobile, they have air transport, they have medical support, logistics, and they also have the political support of the Security Council and all the member states to ensure that the parties on the ground, those who are in conflict, are encouraged to move towards peace.
This year, the forum aims to raise peace missions' capacity to face up to diversified and evolving threats to peace.
Sometimes you have a mixture of terrorist threats as well as maybe organized crime. For example, in the north of Mali, you have these elements that are intermixing along with national demands for representation and political participation. And these sometimes intermix because in countries where there is little government or broken government because of conflict, you have both the demand from local actors for political peace, and you have other outside elements taking advantage of a lack of law and order, a lack of functioning government to come in and create trouble, to extract resources, to carry out criminal activity.
China has been an active contributor to UN peacekeeping operations since 1990. Last year, it contributed more than $500 million, ranking 6th among donors. And there are over 2,000 Chinese peacekeepers currently deployed in 9 UN missions around the globe.
It's very visible, the quality of the Chinese in the mission. The engineers, they are very important in one country where we don't have roads. We need to move the troops, but we don't have the roads. And the roads deteriorated along the time, a long time with the violence, a long time with the war. And then the roads deteriorated, and the Chinese are working hard to renovate, to recuperate some roads, to make possible the movement not only for the troops but for the population as well.
China's peacekeeping engagement has been positive for both China and the UN. In the long run, how Beijing chooses to project its influence and shape peacekeeping norms will determine whether and how China continues to be
the troops but for the population as well.
China's peacekeeping engagement has been positive for both China and the UN. In the long run, how Beijing chooses to project its influence and shape peacekeeping norms will determine whether and how China continues to be an active contributor to UN peacekeeping. CCTV.
Are busy removing barriers from streets that have been occupied by protesters for more than 2 weeks. Well, the move is aimed at clearing the way for traffic. And for the very latest, we're now joined by our reporter Li Juejun from Hong Kong. Good evening, Juejun. So could you please tell us more about the police efforts that have been ongoing to clear the streets in Hong Kong?
It's the 17th day of the Occupy Central movement in Hong Kong. The police continue their operation to dismantle some barricades in the occupied areas, while tensions are rising between pro- and anti-Occupy groups, with several scuffles breaking out in recent days. The protests are disrupting business and daily life of the Hong Kong residents, so more and more people are calling on the ACR government to clear the streets as soon as possible. The police continue their operation to clear the protesters' barricades. Early on Tuesday morning, they removed some barriers in Causeway Bay. Westbound traffic has been restored on Yiwu Street, which has been closed down for over 2 weeks. And hours later, they started clearance in another major street in Admiralty. I'm now at the Causeway in Admiralty. You can see behind me that the police are removing the barricades set up by the protesters. The police said their action is to allow the resumption of the traffic here. The police operation started on Monday as they dismantled some roadblocks in Mong Kok and Admiralty. The officers said they would continue removing barricades in occupied areas. Many residents say they support the police action.
These student protesters are too naive. It is illegal for them to occupy the roads. Wherever it is, it's wrong, no matter it's in the US or UK.
These young protesters are damaging Hong Kong's economy. They are destroying Hong Kong's prosperity, which is created by us old generations.
As the demonstration entered the third week, the anti-Occupy voices are getting louder. On Monday, dozens of men attempted to remove barricades erected by the protesters near the government headquarters. Scores of cab drivers honked their horns in support of the removal of the barricades. In recent days, several groups have launched different movements to oppose Occupy protests. One group initiated an assembly to gather people's signatures to demand demonstrators to leave the streets. The group said they will launch a counter-encirclement movement to push the occupants out of the street if the government does not clear them. Earlier, Chief Executive Liang Chunyin spoke to a local TV that the Occupy Central movement has spun out of control and the situation could not last long.
The government doesn't want to clear protesters from the streets unless it has to. But if that day does come, the police will use the minimum force required to reduce the repercussions as far as possible. We don't want to see young people get hurt.
Despite the government's repeated orders to disperse, the protesters still vowed to stay until they see clear signs of progress. But with the rising anti-Occupy sentiment, many warn more possible clashes between the pro and anti-Occupy camps. The police have called each side to be calm and rational to avoid violence.